Hi, welcome everyone to the second module. Um, this module will focus on shadow education, standardized testing, and educational inequalities. And I start here with a photo from Bangkok of the private tutors. It's kind of a unique Hong Kong phenomenon. We don't find it in other places. We'll find out later that actually Hong Kong is a key research area for understanding private supplementary tutoring. But let me start in what might seem like a strange place. And that place is Hongshucheng. Um, Hong came from just outside of Guangzhou today, and by most accounts, he was a stellar student. By the age of 7, he was already studying. By the age of 5 or 6, he was able to recite the 4 books, the Confucian classics, right? Um, but by 15, actually, he became a private tutor. That's less the focus of what we're looking at here. But the larger moral of the Hong story is that he studied and studied and studied. And he was, by all accounts, a very bright pupil. Um, but the imperial examinations, the Keju, the pass rate was 1%. He retook the test 4 times, but never succeeded. Now, the Chinese history buffs among you might know a little bit about what happened to him, but let's take a look at classical Chinese education because I think it's important. So, right, let's look at the Keju. Um, between a 1 to 2% pass rate. This was happening in the context of about 5 to 10% literacy rate in China. We should really keep this in mind when we talk about how China values education. It does and it doesn't. You would see here like entire villages would pool resources for a candidate. Um, at the time, it was considered a symbol of equality. Why is that? Was it? Well, it was considered a symbol of equality because it was considered a meritocracy. China, at this point, was trying to avoid the same issues that were plaguing Europe and other places, which is aristocracy, right? You have people born into families, and then they have their kids take over the same position, and they're not always usually that good at these positions, these hereditary positions that they were born into. So the Keju was an attempt to disrupt that, and everyone supposedly had a level playing field. If you just studied hard enough, you could make it all the way to the Forbidden City, right? And I kind of asked the question, how similar or dissimilar is this from the HKDSC, the Gaokao, etc.? In my mind, I think they're very similar. What's changed is the scope, right? I think they're both kind of testing arbitrary knowledge. Now, so with the Keju, one of the key things was learning how to write the 8-legged essay, right? And we would look back at this today and say, it's not a very relevant or important skill, but that was the skill you needed to move up in society, right? I think you can kind of start asking the same questions about what the Gaokao and Hong Kong exams are asking. That are they really that useful? In terms of skills, or is it passing on something else, right? That maybe is not that useful, but it's very important for moving in society. Um, Now, again, for you history buffs, you know what happened to Hong. He took the test. He failed the test 4 times, and we got from this the Taiping Rebellion that killed 20 million people. So the tutor convinces himself that he's the younger brother of Jesus. Starts with the Hakka outside Guangzhou. It ends in Sichuan. Um, I find this really interesting and kind of beg the question, uh, why is it different in Hong Kong and in China where the pressures on examination are really high? Could it be because the pass rates aren't quite that low? You know, that in Hong Kong it's about 20% to get in higher education. About 20% of students get into higher education, which is the goal of doing these exams, whereas there was 1 to 2%. But I think you see here just the extraordinary social pressure that has been there for a very long time. Let me move 12 time zones away to my own hometown. So in America, we used education in a different way. We did literacy tests, and we used literacy tests basically to stop people from voting. And if you take a minute looking at some of these questions, they're really, really difficult. I'm using this to try to illustrate the point that people can use certain forms of knowledge for the purpose of exclusion. If you listen to some people like Mark Mason, who is at IED, they'll tell you actually that the purpose of testing is not to get students to pass, it's to fail them, right? That certain types of knowledge are actually used to hinder mobility, not just increase mobility, right? I'll give you a minute just to kind of look at the literacy test and see if you can, I don't know, try question number 3. Let's pivot into shadow education and say, what is it? Well, there's actually some debate about it. What is tutoring? What is shadow education? But generally, we're talking specifically about private supplementary tutoring, right? So it's private. It's being bought and sold in an open market, right? It is supplementary, and that it is related to core subject material, right? So there's growing debate about should we count, for instance, after-school care or even like, say, travel programs that could help students, but it's not directly related to the curriculum? That's an open debate right now in the field. It's growing everywhere. You'll see there a link to CERC. You can click it on the PowerPoint. I'll try to put it in the YouTube thing. But what we do know is it's growing. As Mark Bray says, the shadow itself is growing. And it kind of started in Asia. Why? We don't have great answers. What we see is that Asia has, we use the term massified much more quickly than others. So education is becoming more universal and available, and then it's creating what some people are calling like an educational arms race, right? So if everyone has a little bit, everyone's inching over each other, trying to get a little bit more. I'd also invite you to take a look at our research at CERC. I say our, I've been affiliated with them for a very long time. But Mark Bray has about half a dozen PhD students and several master students looking at shadow education. And he's been trying to turn it into a research agenda. We're putting it, for instance, in the book I'm working on in the Commonwealth. So all of this kind of leads to this. Education. What is the value of education? Does shadow education capture this value? Do test scores capture this? If not, what are test scores really capturing then? Put this out here kind of begging the question, what's the difference between IED and Hong Kong U? I point out that I taught at Hong Kong U before I was teaching at IED. So actually, the teacher quality here is not that bad. But I'm using this as a gateway to kind of talk about just how we think about universities, how we, the prestige that comes with one degree versus a different degree, how we think about, oh, this is a university, this is an institute. It's very much socially constructed. I think the actual talents being bestowed are not that different, right? But there's a certain prestige, and so let's talk about what that would mean. It's kind of raising the questions that we would do in class. What will change if Hong Kong gets the university title? This is the big issue right now. Most people I talk to who know, so actually not much would change. We're already doing everything like a university does, right? We're competing for certain grants. We have PhD students. We're actually one of the highest producing education departments for faculties in Hong Kong. Will the teaching change? Probably not. Will the value of the degree change? Probably. Will my pay change? I don't know. But this is kind of getting us into this question of how much of the value of education is kind of a social construction, like an essay, versus actual real skills.